Hello and welcome to the Arise interview, where we take time to reflect on the big stories from the news and on the fortunes and affairs of the world in an hour of conversation with commentators, analysts and thought leaders. I'm Charles Anyegulu. Coming up in the next 60 minutes, a massive ray of light for Nigeria, the release and return home of hundreds of schoolboys kidnapped from their boarding school in Kankara in northwest Katsina state. They'd been located by security forces in Zamfara forest, where they were left by their captors. The kidnappings have prompted comparisons with the abduction of the Chibok girls 6 years ago. But while many of the girls taken in 2014 are still missing, this time the authorities seem to have been much more successful in getting the boys back, but the circumstances of their release remain unclear. We have assessment from a top Nigerian security analyst. We'll also be hearing from him about the process of adjusting to life after such a dystopian experience. Plus, as Nigeria grapples with what appears to be a rise in fresh COVID-19 cases, fueling fears that a second wave of the pandemic is imminent, we'll meet one Nigerian who tested positive for coronavirus in the UK after doing everything he could to stay safe and avoid the horror of the disease and hospital admission. And later, world leaders in education, including UNESCO, UNICEF, and ministers and officials from 40 countries, along with specialist NGOs, have been meeting virtually this week to help set in motion far-reaching changes to education in the wake of COVID-19. It follows a year of disrupted learning for more than 1 billion young people across Africa and the world. We'll speak to one of UNESCO's directors in East Africa, coming up. So, hundreds of schoolboys who were abducted by gunmen a week ago in northwest Nigeria have arrived back in their home state, Katsina. They were taken by bus to Government House in the state capital. The boys appeared before television cameras barefoot and clutching blankets. The governor of Katsina State, Aminu Bello Mazari, said all 344 of those who were kidnapped have been freed. The Islamist group Boko Haram has said it carried out the mass abduction, but the authorities are skeptical, with state officials saying it was done by criminal gangs who normally kidnap people for money, though they insist that no ransom was paid. Analysts, though, say the pattern of behavior seems to point to Boko Haram rather than just local bandits. President Buhari has admitted that he has not yet succeeded in securing the country, but said he was determined to do so.
We found out that still, somehow, the terrorists or the abductors still get weapons and ammunition. They still take people hostages. They are collecting millions of naira. We have a lot of work ahead of us, and some of the things we may not say. I don't want to compromise the security and the efforts being put by the law enforcement agencies. But really, we are acutely aware of our responsibilities. Our responsibility is to secure the country. So we have a lot of work to do. Well, armed forces know their job. I meet them. We have security meetings from time to time. They must be very clear of my instructions. Their efforts is not good enough for me. Our responsibility, as I said, is to secure this country for all the citizens to do their businesses without any problem. We haven't achieved that yet, but we will keep on trying.
Oh, that's President Buhari there speaking earlier. Well, for more on the many unanswered questions following the safe return of the Kankara boys, I'm joined now via WebEx by the Nigerian security and defense consultant, Dr. Kabiru Adamu. Thank you very much indeed for joining us. You've had some time to digest what has happened so far. Do we know how and why the boys were released?
My response would be based on information I'm piecing together from the governor of Zamfara State and the governor of Katsina State, who were instrumental to the release of the boys. Both of them indicated that the Mieti Allah Cattle Breeders Association of Nigeria were engaged, and they served as the facilitators of the negotiation that led to the release of the boys. Both of them also emphatically mentioned that no ransom was paid for the release of the boys. Both of them also agreed to the fact that the boys were kept in a forest close to Chafe in Zamfara state. They also agreed that the role played by the military as well as other security agencies in forming a perimeter cycle, as it were, around where these boys were being held may have aided and facilitated the release of the boys. So clearly, it was a combination of both, kinetic or security force, as it were, and diplomatic engagement that led to the release of the boys.
Obviously, a lot of the details, Dr. Kabiru, are still unclear, let's put it that way, at this stage. But based on your experience, your knowledge, you don't think that a ransom was paid?
So ransom can mean several things. The average Nigerian, when he or she hears ransom, the conclusion is that we're talking of financial ransom. But in the intelligence world and in the world of the murky world of these bandits and terrorists, ransom can mean several things. It could mean, as an example, prisoner exchange. It could mean a political demand. It could mean even drugs. They're known to abuse drugs. It could also mean some form of, right of way. So even if we go by the statement by the political actors that no ransom was paid, that does not, foreclose the possibility that some other incentivization took place in the form of, leverage given or allowed as a result of demands or to facilitate and ease the negotiation that led to the release of the boys.
I mean, take us down that road. I mean, what sort of other possible inducements could there be? I mean, these are people who we're told are either criminals or are sort of bandits with affiliation to Boko Haram. And in either case, their motivation seems to be money.
Not necessarily. In the case of, Jamaat al-Sunnah al-Dawat wal-Jihad, our conclusion based on studying their activities in the last 11 to 12 years tells us their motivation is threefold: economic, financial, political, and then unfortunately there is also a social component to it. Now, our professional opinion is that the group that carried out the action may be loosely affiliated with the Jamaat al-Sunnah al-Jihad. The video that was released yesterday, which gave an indication of what their demands are, spoke of certain indications. One of them is financial, like you mentioned, but beyond the financial, one key thing that I got out of that video is the statement that stop attacking Fulanis. Over time in the Northwest, there has been this conflict between Hausas and Fulanis as a result of the attacks that, the stigmatization, as it were, and the labeling of the attackers as being Fulanis. And this may be real, but then, you and I know that groups like that are not really necessarily just one ethnic group, but then they've been stigmatized and labeled as Fulanis. So vigilantes, were created, and these vigilantes started attacking the Fulanis. So in that video, they made two demands: stop attacking the Fulanis and then disband the vigilantes. So clearly telling us that these are the bandits, Fulani extremists, quote unquote, or bandits that were behind those attacks. And yes, the involvement of the Jamaat al-Sunnah al-Dawat wal-Jihad is a possibility, because of course we saw Shekau in that video, but I think it was just an opportunity that he saw. He's probably losing relevance, and I say this with all sense of responsibility, and so he wants to capitalize on such an opportunity. I mean, we've entered, unfortunately, I would use the loose word, infamous Guinness Book of Record as having recorded the largest number of abductions. And so a group like Jamaat al Dawat Wal Jihad would want to capitalize on that and take advantage. Of course, the publicity that recorded or generated is good for his profile, as it were.
And just to point out that the name that you're using there is the original name of really Boko Haram. It's the same group. I mean, but I suppose what is likely to happen now is that we have to watch and see to know whether the fingerprints of Boko Haram is in this. And somebody was saying that the way that we're going to know is if we see more of this kind of thing happening in the Northwest with the same kind of pattern and these kind of large abductions, which are typical of Boko Haram.
So, Charles, I'm very hopeful, and frankly, I hope, in fact, at the risk of sounding a bit desperate, I'll probably go out and drum it to whoever wants to listen that we should take steps to avoid that. The North is at the bottom of almost all the statistics that on human development, especially on education. So imagine the consequence of allowing a continuation of this type of mass abductions in schools, when clearly there are things that can be done to prevent that. We're talking of groups that are less than 1% of our population in Nigeria, so we cannot be held ransom by this group. And I would like to drum it out that there are steps that can be taken. Some of us in security are volunteering ourselves to assist, especially the Ministry of Education and the government as a whole, in terms of implementing those steps. We're not reinventing the wheel. We're not creating rockets. These are things that have been tried in other countries. The Safe School Initiative, as an example, was
right. Okay. I'll tell you what, Kabiru, the points you're making are very important. Please stay with us. I want to come back to you and let you finish that thought. You're watching the Arise interview. Plenty more still ahead as we continue our chat about the kidnapped boys of Kankara who are now free. Stay with us. Welcome back to the Arise interview. I'm Charles Anyegolu. And so freedom for the boys of Kankara, kidnapped from their boarding school in Katsina state in northwest Nigeria last week. Freed in neighboring Zamfara state, they were taken back home by bus today for medical examination. Then a meeting with President Buhari before they are returned to their families. They appeared before the TV cameras clutching blankets, many of them barefoot, one of them telling Arise News that the kidnappers had barely fed them.
The reason why I shot this video is not a reason, but I am convinced to shot this video by the gangs of armed robbers. I am convinced. Sincerely speaking, the gangs of the armed robbers are very scared of what is happening from the jets. They assigned me to speak directly from this video to tell our government that they should stop sending armies and jets. If not, they are going to kill us. That is just the reason why we.
So who gave you the phone? Are they bandits or are they Boko Haram? What do you think?
I did not know who they are, but since they said I should say they are Boko Haram, the gangs of Abu Shekau.
So they asked you to say they are?
Yes.
What is your experience then?
What I experienced, sincerely speaking, they are not Boko Haram.
During your days in captivity, what happened to you when you were there? I can see your clothes stained. What happened?
Yes. We suffer a lot physically. They beat us morning, evening, night.
I have the guy that did the video, so we can have him there. Please go outside.
We suffer a lot. They only give us food once in a day and water twice in a day. They beat us, and some of the gangs end up beating us with cans. They are just as small and tiny boys with the cans, with the big guns. Like, I don't know how to explain the guns, but
Thank you.
thank you, sir.
Thank you.
And that's the raw, unedited footage of an interview that our correspondent, Maka Okoye, had with the boy who appeared in that ostensible Boko Haram video that was released yesterday, the one who spoke on behalf of the rest of the kidnapped boys. And the Nigerian security and defense consultant, Dr. Kabiru Adamu, is still with me via WebEx. Thank you very much indeed for staying with us. And just watching that young man, I expect that there's going to be a lot of trauma after this, the usual sort of post-traumatic stress and so on. And before we went on break, you were talking to us about what the next steps should be and the fact that all the security people, including people like yourself, consultants and so on, should be brought together to work out a strategy for this.
Excellent. And, one of the first steps I would recommend is to immediately dominate the forested parts of, Nigeria, as it were, starting from the north, that has more of this challenge. This forest, most of them belong to the state governments, although a few constitutionally belong, the reserves that is belong to the federal government. So the two sides should come together and agree some modalities. If we have the funding, then I would recommend technology, surveillance, that would allow us to know whatever living thing is in those forests. Even if it's ants, when they move, there is technology that would allow you to know the movement of those ants. So beyond that, we also need to, I was making reference to the Safe School Initiative, and of course the Safe School Declaration, which is the current focus of the world, as it were. Nigeria has signed the treaty for that declaration, and what is remaining is a policy statement as well as a law by the legislature that would back the implementation of that declaration. So there is a role for the governors to play in that regard. They can speak with members representing their states in the National Assembly, encourage them to pass a draft law on the implementation of that Safe School Declaration. And then, of course, hopefully, once that is passed, it would empower the ministries, departments, and agencies to now implement that Safe School Declaration. And I was saying that some of us can assist in developing templates that would assist Ministry of Education, as an example, in conducting audits, security assessments, vulnerability assessments, as well as a checklist that schools can use to determine their current and the preferred security posture. All of these things can be done at a very cheap cost. The Safe Schools Declaration talks about the role of different stakeholders. And so once it's implemented, the community itself can assist in protecting the schools. Traditional rulers would have a role to play. All of us would have a role to play. Now, for the security agencies, one of the things that has come out clearly in the release or rescue of the boys is that coordination, it works. Where you operate in silos and there is unhealthy rivalry, then the result is the kind of challenges would have. But where they operate in a coordinated manner, like we saw after the Kankara incident, then the result will be success. So I hope that they would pick from this, and then work better going forward in terms of coordinating their efforts and bringing together all the resources they have. In doing that, I would recommend strongly that they learn to harvest intelligence. There is a lot of intelligence that we're not harvesting. From the chat your correspondent had with the boy, as well as other discussions I've had on the incident, it appears the kidnappers herded these boys, walked with them through villages, and in the process abducted adults. At least I'm sure of one of the instances in Kankara where they abducted 6 adults, and they now release these adults. And I'm not aware, it's not on record that any of the security agencies have approached these 6 adults to hear from them. what their experiences were. At least they will be able to describe the kidnappers. They will be able to give some information that will be useful to the intelligence. So we need to go the granular level so that we can harvest this intelligence in the markets where these kidnappers buy some of the things they need. If we deploy and start harvesting intelligence at that granular level, then that is when we would have the kind of picture and intelligence we need. And for me, that's the way to go. This idea where you stay in the city in Abuja and think you can get intelligence because, quote unquote, you probably have money or authority is not the way to go. Grassroots deployment, involvement at that granular level, harvesting that intelligence at that level is what would help us going forward.
Well, that's pretty comprehensive stuff. And now that you've told them everything, all your knowledge, they don't have to pay you anymore, do they? All they've got to do is watch or listen to this program. But on a more serious note, and those are very good points you raised, in terms of lessons learned from what has happened, I'm just wondering whether there is also something to be done about prosecutions. I mean, what's going to happen to the kidnappers now? Are they likely to be arrested and prosecuted?
So the administration of criminal justice is one of the reasons why we're where we are. When vigilantes attack Fulanis and kill them, I mean, that's an offense in all ramifications. When Fulanis attack villagers and kill them, that's an offense. And because law enforcement fails in punishing the offenders or arresting them, then we're where we are. So in this instance too, if the administration of criminal justice fails us in terms of arresting the perpetrators of this and punishing them, then unfortunately it's a further incentive for other groups to also engage in this type of forces. I believe personally, although time will not allow us to discuss this, that there are centrifugal forces at play in Nigeria that is breeding this type of insecurity. And the politicians need to learn to address these centrifugal forces. Some of them are political.
Well, as you said, Kabiru, fascinating stuff, not enough time to get into it, but always an enormous pleasure talking with you and having the benefit of your analysis. The Nigerian security and defense consultant, Dr. Kabiru Adamu.